Good afternoon. We saved the best for the last. Okay, let me start by saying that. Hopefully, you all sort of had a good set of discussions. We had like about 5 different discussion topics planned, and hopefully, you all had a chance to participate in one of those kind of thing. But it's been a long day, and fully aware of that. But we got an amazing person to join me here on stage in just a minute or so here. Mustafa, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome you here today. Thank you for being here. Okay. For those of you who don't know Mustafa, he's what I call a quintessential AI entrepreneur. Well before AI became the sort of the craze that it is today, Mustafa started devoting his life towards AI. Today he's the CEO of Microsoft Consumer AI, and he's also the co-founder and former head of Applied AI at DeepMind, a company that was acquired way back by Google. After leaving DeepMind, Mustafa co-founded Inflection AI back in 2022. And earlier this year, Microsoft and Inflection got into a pretty interesting partnership, okay? with the net result that Mustafa is now one of the key leaders at Microsoft, helping the company think about hey, what is the future of AI, particularly as it relates to what should consumers expect and what can they get in terms of AI and all the goodness that comes with AI. Just last month, the Time magazine sort of published its list of 100 most influential people, 100 most important people in AI, and obviously that list wouldn't have been complete without Mustafa being on this list. And that's just one of the many recognitions that Mustafa has had in his career. So without further ado, Mustafa, thank you again, and please join me here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Since you are flying in today from New York, Mustafa, I want to make sure that you heard about a couple of things that happened today.
Tell me.
And then I'll go to yesterday. Okay?
Yeah. Wherever you want to start, right. No problem.
One is obviously one of your closest partners talked about a pretty big funding round. The other is Poolside AI, which is again one of the next gen of the modern AI companies, raised about $500 million kind of thing. And we look at the amount of capital flowing in and the amount of investments that are happening in big tech. And it brought me back 24 hours ago when I heard about the set of announcements that you made yesterday in New York, right? And I really loved what you said about hey, every human being on this planet will have a personal AI assistant. So start from that and tell us all a little bit about what you announced to the world yesterday.
I think we're in a weird time because even though everybody is paying attention and we're all kind of seeing the same technological trend, we're all focused on investing or building or partnering in some way, I think we're still not fully able to predict what the world's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. And that's actually quite normal. The same sort of thing happened in the very early days of the internet. It was super hard to predict that mobile was going to take the form that it did and that business models were going to adapt to this new modality. And I think the same is true now, even though we have a pretty clear line of sight to the capabilities that are going to emerge in the next couple of years. It's very difficult to say what the combination of those capabilities means for existing ecosystems, for incentive structures, and for the kinds of businesses that we're going to build. I mean, it is sort of as profound as recognizing that for the first time in human history, machines have learned to speak our languages. And so the programming interface has already fundamentally changed. And so everybody is going to get access to this tool that they can use to program the digital world around them. And obviously that programming then changes us back. And so it sort of no longer becomes a tool. It's certainly not a tool in the traditional sense, where there's a very handcrafted, clear set of instructions that delivers a known output in this deterministic way. There's this dynamic and interactive nature, which is like an inherent fundamental property of this new thing. It's really better not to try and box it yet, because it's just quite different to anything we've known. We haven't really encountered a new design material, or I often refer to it as a new clay that we sculpt with. As a creative or a product maker or a builder, there's now this new thing that you have to craft, which is quite different in characteristics to learning to program and having built websites and built apps and so on. It's really quite different. You're now creating a sustained experience. Your model, your LLM that you put into production in any setting is going to continuously adapt to the response of the environment or to the customer or to the user. And so you're obviously unable to shape that past the second or third step. And so really what you're crafting is a tone, and a style and a personality. And, I think that really is quite different, and it's going to be amazing to see what it looks like in 2028 or 2030.
That brings up one thing that people commonly say, Mustafa, to my mind, which is like, hey, we tend to normally overestimate what can happen in a year's time, and we absolutely underestimate what can happen in a 10-year time frame kind of thing, right? So when you talk about 2028 or 2030 or whatever it is kind of thing, I actually don't know whether we really are imagining enough about what is potential and what is possible kind of thing. I do want to go back to earlier this year, March, I think it was March, when you gave a TED talk. I don't know how many of you here have seen that TED talk. Some people have seen. For those of you who haven't seen, I would encourage you to go see it after this conference, not during this conference kind of thing. But it is for me, it was a very inspirational sort of set of things that I heard and sort of learned from your talk. One of the things that you talked about there is hey, we really are at an inflection point, and maybe that's why your last company was called Inflection.ai kind of thing. But we really at an inflection point as far as humanity goes. And the other metaphor that you used there, which I really liked, was hey, there is a new digital species that is coming into existence. Tell us a little more about that vision, and then we can tie it to the announcements that you made yesterday.
Well, look, what you first said was also totally right, which is that we're really quite bad at making predictions, and yet all I do all day long is try and make predictions and then bet on them. I think it is actually quite possible to bet on the capabilities that are likely to emerge in the next 2 or 3 years at a capability level. And then the hard task is trying to translate those capabilities into new products, business models, and ecosystems. So if I were to bet on the capabilities, I would say, well, we're doing pretty well at IQ. So the models are increasingly factual. They're reducing hallucinations really significantly. They can retrieve well and conditionally generate over arbitrary documents, whether the web or your private corpus. And it's pretty clear looking back retrospectively, in fact, empirically so, that with each order of magnitude more computation we add, they get easier to control, right? That's a big achievement. There were some people speculating 2 years ago that the models would get bigger and they would get more chaotic and more, difficult to steer, difficult to align. Right. And it turned out that the opposite appears to be true so far. They get better at instruction following. They get more adherent to the kind of nuance of your product design, your behavior policy, your business policy, whatever you're trying to optimize for. So that's kind of on the IQ side. And then the second thing that people said a few years ago was, they're never going to be able to engage empathetically. They're never going to have emotional intelligence. That's always going to be, some special magic source that's far away from, machines. And yet I think they're really starting to show very elegant, very graceful, very fluid interactions, obviously in some of the answers they give in text, but also with the voice. They're really capturing something very seamless and natural about these fast conversational interfaces. And that was some of the things that we launched yesterday. And then the third thing, of course, that we're all talking about is how can it add AQ, this kind of actions quotient, the extent to which it can use tools, communicate with other AIs, reason over things before it produces an output. I think that there isn't that much difference, at least as far as I can see, in the nature of the actions domain compared to the video, image, audio, or text domains is fundamentally the same problem space. And so provided we have enough data, and I think that's a very open question, whether we simulate that or we extract it from existing corpus, it'll probably deliver the same kinds of returns. So on those three fronts, I think we're seeing quite predictable improvements. And then the missing piece that loops all of those together, I think, is memory. And lots of people are working very hard on that. And there's sort of different approaches, but I'm pretty sure in the next sort of 18 months, we're going to have AIs with very, very good memory, if not infinite and perfect, but very good ability to retrieve over arbitrary documents. And it's interesting because the definition of intelligence that has shaped the whole field is AGI, right? Generality. That's kind of the North Star that we've all sort of emphasized. But that's kind of, one definition of intelligence. Another like the same core system is able to perform well across a wide range of environments. That emphasizes that one system has to be general purpose. Another definition of intelligence is the ability to focus on the right thing at the right time. And it's actually much closer to the kind of way that humans operate. Like, my body and my brain will immediately know that if I spill this water, I'll pull my hand away. And if I have some, more complicated tasks that I need to use my prefrontal cortex with, I'll engage a different part of my brain. And so really what my brain is doing, it has lots of different subsystems, and it knows how to select the right system given the context and the task at hand. And so it may be that, if we can direct processing power to the right subsystem at the right time, that's a kind of meta-enabler that enables us to leapfrog the challenges of just scaling it through a traditional context window. So I think those are pretty high confidence capability predictions over the next couple of years. And then you can sort of imagine, okay, if I have really good IQ, EQ, AQ, and memory, that's a very powerful system. Yeah. A very, very powerful system.
And just to build on that, Mustafa, yesterday you talked about adding voice interaction to Copilot. Okay, that was one of the many things that you talked about yesterday, kind of thing. I've sort of been a believer, at least, in hey, the day we can, today you and I interact, using a set of techniques, right? Whereas when I'm interacting with technology or with a machine, it's different for the most part, kind of thing, right? But the more we can use, the standard way of, humans interacting with each other as the way that humans interact with the sort of technology or with a machine, kind of thing, is the day we are going to have, the vision for your EQ come into some level of fulfillment, kind of thing. How do you see the interaction model changing in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with these things is that one can demonstrate, you can sort of ship a really cool demo that works 70% of the time. But in order for these to get widespread adoption, they have to be, effective 99% of the time. So it's super low latency, very accurate, very fluid, really good at interruptions, know when to pause. And I think people often forget how hard it is to go from 90% to 99 and then from 99.9, right? It's really, really, as hard as it is almost to go from 0 to 70% or something. So I think there's still a way to go, but what we demonstrated yesterday was the glimmers of what a more emotionally intuitive experience looks like. Not once yesterday in our launch in New York did I talk about parameters or models or any of the underlying technology, because I think to most consumers it just doesn't really matter. What matters is how does it feel, and does it remember me? Do I trust it because it does the same thing over and over again? Does it interrupt me politely? When it gets it wrong, does it fail gracefully? Those are the those are the feelings that make us trust something and want to use it more, and therefore invest in it and share more and so on. Or just make us skeptical because actually it was a little bit rude or it was kind of stupid or, so that's the kind of that's the tough nut that we've got to crack to really get large scale adoption. And I think we showed glimmers of that yesterday, but there's, we've got a long way to go.
Got it. The other thing you mentioned a few minutes ago is hey, you're going to see more and more interesting applications that come out. Some Microsoft is building, you are building, kind of thing. Some the rest of the ecosystem is going to build. It sort of takes me back to another thing that you said, hey, when the mobile revolution happened, so to speak. And in my mind, as much as you can argue that phones existed or mobile phones existed before iPhone 1 came into existence. iPhone 1 was a sort of inflection point kind of thing, right? But it really, and it sort of came out in the, I think if I remember right, 2007 time frame. And it wasn't till 2010 or 2011, particularly when Uber showed up and when Airbnb showed up, that people really felt like, hey, what could you do with a mobile device, mobile platform, and the kinds of applications, right? As you know, we are like about 22 months into ChatGPT, since ChatGPT showed up in the world kind of thing, right? I still believe that as much as ChatGPT is amazing kind of thing, I don't think the world has seen what is possible in terms of a true AI native application, okay? How do you think about that? Do you think that's behind us or do you think that's ahead of us?
It's definitely ahead of us. I mean, again, I sort of don't even think of this as an application. I think of this as fundamentally a relationship. My team and I are now in the business of engineering personality. We're crafting a lasting, meaningful, trusted relationship. That is the new platform as far as I see it. Because it's not just about voice and text or language. It's really going to be about vision. Your companion is going to see everything that you see in your browser and on your desktop in real time, understanding both the text and all of the images and able to talk to you about it as fluently as I'm talking to you about it now. And so trying to craft that into an application and a business model too soon almost sort of misses how fundamental it's going to be to have this sort of ever-present, fully aware, perpetual memory, sort of companion that needs to be really, really aligned to your interests. It's going to be a highly intimate experience. Much like if you've ever sort of, searched when you're sitting on the couch at night with your partner or your best friend and you're both searching to plan a holiday or look up what you're going to watch, what movie you're going to watch, and you're kind of aware that they're seeing a kind of version of what you're seeing, but slightly different, and you're both talking about it in real time. Like that kind of presence, I don't even know how to describe that. That's why I sort of struggle for metaphors. It's mostly, I think, a lasting relationship with, sort of an idea in your head than a sort of application or a platform. And I think that's what I'm pushing my creative team to really wrestle with, is like we have to sort of immerse ourselves in the capabilities before allowing the experiences and the business models to kind of emerge after.
That's great. Today, there is a fair amount of discussion on large language models, right? How we've seen an explosive growth in whichever dimension you think about, kind of thing, as far as large language models go in the last 4 or 5 years, right? And Microsoft is building a bunch of its own models. Microsoft is partnering with OpenAI for large language models, kind of thing. How, particularly as you're talking to a set of entrepreneurs who are thinking about hey, how do they bring their ideas to sort of reality, kind of thing? How much do you think people should think about or worry about having control at the model layer versus not worry about that and say hey, let me just move up the stack and think about the experience and we call it application, but really the service that you're going to be delivering or the capability that you're going to be delivering. How much do you think people should think about models versus move up the stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think most likely the pre-trained models are going to get commoditized, and I think all the craft is in fine-tuning. And I think a lot of people still haven't quite figured out the everyday tricks of fine-tuning. It is, a lot of the knowledge is widely available, but I think that there's still a lot to learn there, because sort of, and most of it, unfortunately, is not just a technical question, it's an operational question. So the challenge is how you set up your feedback loop, and you have trusted, highly trained, reliable humans who can give, sort of directional input to your models and your modeling team. And I think most people, have slightly jumped too quickly to using models themselves as a judge for RLAIF. And I think that is maybe a little bit premature. And if you really want to craft high quality experiences like we did at Pi with Inflection, then you have to imbue all of the knowledge and expertise of product design into your sort of AI teachers, and close that loop really fast and get them sitting alongside your machine learning engineers. And so I think that fundamental paradigm is going to remain for a little while, and that's where I think all the value is going to be added. And the moment someone sort of really excels in a particular vertical or an application area, it'll be because they've really nailed the fine-tuning loop, and they've got their data flywheel going, and then they've built something that is of outsized value to some customer, and then obviously someone's paying for it, and they have first mover advantage and so on. So I don't think it's going to happen in the pre-training space. I think that's, the good news is it's going to be open sourced, because I think Meta's going to keep open sourcing. So I think that's actually great for the community. And we're not open sourcing the frontier, but we're open sourcing, MLMs and SLMs, so medium language models and small language models. So.
And do you see a world where there is room for LLMs, MLMs, SLMs kind of thing, and different interaction models with all those different models for different use cases, or do you think one is going to win over the other?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be one to rule them all. I mean, as I said, sort of my definition, or I think a helpful definition of intelligence to keep in your working memory is this one about, sort of attention and using the right tool at the right time. So even in our models today, we deploy lots and lots of different models underneath the hood, and it's really your router which is the critical sort of piece. Judging, like, is this a really complicated and rare query, and does it need to be routed to, X model, or is it actually a really quick one? Does it need to go to Y model? Is it safety? Is it retrieval? Is it personalization? There will be some specialized models, obviously, in sort of healthcare, legal, finance, these kinds of things. But, ultimately, there are going to be AIs representing every brand, every business, every influencer. There will be celebrities that are AI-first celebrities. My friend Yuval Noah Harari says that the next great religion is going to be founded by an AI. I think it's quite a cool line. I think he's kind of right. I think it's a little bit scary, but I think that's probably true. They're going to be very capable and persuasive, AIs. And so I think that's another question to think about is just as your AI will draw on a sort of multitude of models under the hood before giving you an answer, it will also query a bunch of other AIs in real time at lightning speed that aren't even in your ecosystem. They'll just go and find that information from, a third-party AI, instantly, within seconds. So, and that's very interesting from a business model perspective, because it means that it's going to be very hard to use the old school, sort of walled garden approach to lock up value, right? Because the new API is just language. And, language can be transmitted, on the phone, on email, in vector space, as you wish, almost in real time. And everyone's going to build an AI by 2030, just as everyone built a website and everyone built an app. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a difficult theoretical question. It's like, how do you sort of capture value long enough? Because it's going to be hyper competitive, which is going to reduce the cost and therefore price for everybody, which is great news in a way, because personalized knowledge and everything is going to be available to everybody. And so we're just going to have to think about what the market dynamics of that end up being. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I don't think anyone has. And especially if you think, and if you disagree with me on 2030, then just roll it out to 2035.
Sure, yeah.
You have the kind of, then it becomes even clearer, I think.
I remember, this is now about, maybe 8 years ago kind of thing. You go and talk to a company like Ford at the time, automotive company, they would tell you that, hey, we think, fully self-driving cars, we see a roadmap where by 2032 we could get there. And then, Elon came around and said, what the hell are you talking about? In the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going to get there. I think, I hope we don't have to wait till 2032. But Elon's time frame has come and gone, and we don't have fully self-driving cars yet, kind of thing. So to me, whether it's 2030 or 35, I think we can debate. But the more interesting thing is, I think the innovation is sort of happening at a very, very, very rapid pace, and I think that is sort of the most exciting. And who knows? Time will tell whether.
The crazy thing is that market dynamics are reducing the cost of production to near zero marginal cost as well. Mm-hmm. That is a really incredible thing, given that this isn't just any raw commodity. This is not just knowledge, but intelligence, right? So intelligence is going to become cheap and abundant. right? And intelligence is the thing that has produced all the value in our world today, right? Everything around us, every building, every material, everything that you can see is somehow a product of our ability as a species to make to synthesize information, make these clever predictions, invent tools, and use those to kind of create more things. And so that you don't have to mess with the AGI superintelligence idea to just kind of wrestle with the profound consequences of the idea that the prediction engine is going to be super cheap and widely available to everybody. I think everyone's got so caught up in, sort of the superintelligence thing as it's almost like a personification. It's like it's going to turn into this person that is all powerful, this omniscient, omnipotent being. And I think it's sort of jumping from 0 to 1,000 too quickly. There's these steps along the way that are going to be incredible for global productivity and well-being, and also kind of disrupt many of the sort of incentive structures and value creation and distribution structures that we've come to sort of know so well.
One of the, just maybe it's because of my background or whatever it is, right? I really think about hey, how can AI help with software development? Okay? And I think the world is seeing like a lot of great progress, starting with GitHub Copilot and everything else that has happened kind of thing. How do you feel the AI is sort of helping with software development as we move forward kind of thing? Particularly when you think like about hey, if an AI system can create another AI system kind of thing, and it can all be done automatically or near automatic or whatever it is kind of thing, do you think that's going to exponentially increase the rate of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already seeing that. I mean, the GitHub Copilot is really quite incredible. I mean, it's just remarkable how much time it's saving. And I think that's obviously going to continue because we're going to be finding more and more efficient ways to produce the same software. And, some of the kind of new fully generative experiences are kind of incredible. So the question of whether it then leads to an intelligence explosion or recursive self-improvement, I think is premature. I don't see that today, but I do think that we'll have to be careful about the kinds of incentives that you give some of these systems in a few years' time. And there are some capabilities that you can sort of put your arms around and be like, okay, this is a higher risk set of capabilities. Like autonomy is clearly a higher risk set of capabilities. One has to define that and really sort of bound the scope of that and so on if you're actually going to make a meaningful intervention from a regulatory perspective. So that's tough. But likewise, recursive self-improvement, that is clearly going to raise the risk level, like in 5 to 10 years' time, and probably needs to be a capability that will be looked at, I think, by regulators in a sensible way. The challenge of these things is going to be like defining them and not kind of like massively slowing down innovation, because I think that's quite likely, and they'll probably over-regulate, and that's probably bad. That's probably bad.
You mentioned AGI a couple of times now, Mustafa, and my sort of own experience with AGI, when I talk to people about AGI, you sort of can really divide the world into two parts, right? One part that says like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And the other part, oh my God, that's the end of the world, right? And how can I even imagine AGI coming to existence? That means bad things could happen, and you can go back to Terminator and the what you've seen in movies kind of thing. But in general, how do you think about safety? And yeah, you just mentioned hey, in the next 5 to 10 years, as autonomous comes into truly existence, you'll have to think about because that's on the one hand, it's a high reward situation, but it's also that is high risk situation kind of thing, right? So as you think about sort of your vision for hey, every human being on this planet is going to have an AI assistant kind of thing. What are the pitfalls? What are the things that people both you are thinking about, and by extension, everybody here who's working on AI in one way, shape, or form, what should they be thinking about as far as guardrails or safety or other things that go with that?
Yeah, I mean, every new technology comes with unprecedented risks that at the time feel, really profoundly different to anything that you've seen before. In my book, I found this story in the 1830s of the first passenger railway journey in Liverpool. And the train and the tracks were so unfamiliar to the celebration party that was welcoming the arrival of this new train, and it included the Prime Minister and the local MP of Liverpool in like 1830, that they actually stood on the tracks to welcome the train coming. And it killed like 15 people in the party, including the MP of Liverpool. Because they couldn't quite grasp the concept that this thing was like gonna come straight through them. It's just like, and we are the same species as them, just like 170 years on. And I think that's a kind of profound thing to just like absorb, is that new thing, and now we have trains all over the world, and they've done incredible things, and they're like, they feel like some of the safest things we've ever encountered, right? They feel like banal and very mundane, right? So, the first time something happens, it feels freaky. The second time, you're like, okay, how do we wrap our hands around it? And by the third time, we really have put in place all kinds of governance mechanisms. I mean, think about a car, for example, that's regulated by scores of different agencies, layers of protections, from seatbelts to driver emissions to traffic lights to driver training to windscreen tensile strength. I mean, it takes time, but we layer up mechanisms for containment. Which is why, when drones came along, right, we sort of took all of the experience that has been developed over 80 years of aviation regulation and sort of just applied it to that new thing. And now we don't have drones wandering around autonomously and freely, invading our privacy and delivering packages in funky ways and all the rest of it. And it's all pretty regulated, and it's sort of had kind of a modest impact. So the key thing is that we have to learn the lessons of the previous technological wave. In my case, this would be Web 2 and social media age, because that's kind of the closest, and all the sort of issues and mistakes of that, and make sure that we're like applying those lessons as quickly as possible with, into the kind of new thing that we're facing. So that's a long way of saying, like, I'm optimistic about it only to the extent that we take seriously the scale of the risk, and that we really embrace the responsibility that this isn't just going to be straightforward, it is going to be really hard. And there will certainly be some harm, like there is no path to no harm. And it may be that, it may be that the toughest calls we have to make in the future are actually about what we don't do, with technology. Because we are crossing a precipice where, sort of a tiny concentrated sort of cluster of breakthroughs can have an effect on hundreds of millions of people very, very quickly. So that one-to-many effect is also unprecedented. It's like, that's not something that I think we've really grappled with before as a species.
Do you feel like, as a AI sort of technologist, right, that you and the rest of the world are spending enough time thinking about, safety? Or is that like, hey, let's go build the technology, let's see what the capability, what the boundaries are, and then we'll sort of, think about safety kind of thing. Where do you think we are on that spectrum?
I kind of go both ways. Partly the safety stuff drives me nuts, because it's like, I feel like I've been talking about it since 2010. But then partly it's like one of the most important things to worry about. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as with all these things, it sort of just feels really important and urgent, and also just like, we sort of hear the same thing over and over again. And are you a doomer, or are you a hyper optimist? And I think that we get tired of each other's rhetoric, and so I think thinking about how we make things practical is kind of the big challenge these days with the intensity of social media and all the criticism and stuff like that.
Got it. So I know we are, as much as it's been a great conversation, I know that we are coming close to the wire in terms of time. But let me sort of ask you one last question. The vast majority of the audience are people who are founders or sort of entrepreneurs, or people working in AI in one way, shape, or form, right? Starting from hey, I got 2 people in my company and a PowerPoint to something that's at scale kind of thing. If there are 1 or 2 things you want to tell the next generation entrepreneurs, what would you say?
One thing I think is kind of underappreciated is take more risk. I mean, it's kind of maybe a weird thing to say to a lot of to a room of entrepreneurs, but I do often just see people not being all in enough. You have to have everything on the line. And I think, I've certainly had that multiple times, and sometimes hit the wall really hard. But I really think that if your entire mindset is not I'm prepared to sacrifice absolutely everything and really focus on execution. And it creates this like amazing radical accountability, which just focuses the mind on like do or die. And that sometimes I feel like there's, even in entrepreneurial communities, like sort of too much comfort. And, I really think that's like a powerful thing that drives our creativity forward. So like, it's a great thing to be all in. It really is. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you. Please join me in thanking us.
Thank you very much. That was really great. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on stage for a little bit, but I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Take care. Thanks. I really enjoy